I was born in Glen Ridge, New Jersey, and the reason I was born in Glen Ridge was the maternity ward of Mountainside Hospital was in Glen Ridge. But really, I lived in Montclair, New Jersey. I lived there my whole life until I was 18. I was an only child. My parents were fantastic. My dad, Tom Galligan, Sr., and my mom, Elizabeth Rudesköld Galligan. That's a Swedish name. I went to elementary school at Watchung School, which was a neighborhood school, through 5th grade. Then I went to a school called the Rand School as Montclair was dealing with issues of desegregation and busing. In 7th grade, from 7th to 12th grade, I went to a school in my town, private school, Montclair Academy. And so those are my high school years. As an undergraduate, I went to Stanford. I had applied to Yale, which didn't think we were a good match, to Princeton, which waitlisted me, to the University of Virginia, where I was admitted, and to Rutgers, which was my dad's alma mater, where I was admitted. And I also got into Stanford. Stanford was always very, very high on my list. And when I got in, I booked my flight to California, and I went off 3,000 miles away to college. My first real declared major was, I'm 18 years old, I'm in California, my parents are on the other side of the country, whoopee! But scholastically, I thought that I would be a history major. And because I loved history as a child, and I've always loved history. Along the way, I moved to political science. I enjoyed the introductory political science course that I took. It was easier to be a political science major at Stanford than it was to be a history major, and I'll confess that that influenced my decision. Then I wanted to be the great American novelist, so I switched to English as a major. I had to take a course in Chaucer, which was in the language of the time. I switched back to political science, and so I graduated with a bachelor's degree from Stanford University in political science. From the time I was a child, if you asked me what I wanted to be, I would have said a lawyer, because my dad was a lawyer. He was a lawyer for Colgate-Palmolive. He's first generation college, first generation law school, and so he brainwashed me as a child. But if I'm not a lawyer, I want to be a writer or a teacher. And wonderfully, I've gotten to do all three of those things. I got out of college. I went home to New Jersey. I got a job as a lawn doctor. It was my first graduate program. It was a 3-day college in South Jersey to learn how to fertilize lawns. During my career as a lawn doctor, I decided I need to go back to school. So I applied to law schools, and I applied to Master of Fine Arts in creative writing programs. And I got into both. And I wanted to spend the rest of my life, I thought, on the West Coast. So the law school, one of the law schools I'd gotten into was the University of Puget Sound in Tacoma, Washington. I had been to Washington during one of those sunny, beautiful weeks in the summertime. And so I thought, I'm going to go to law school to prove that to my dad that it's not for me. And then I'm going to go off and I'm going to write my novels. And 3 weeks in, I thought, man, this is killing me, but I am loving it. I can't say that I loved all the work I was doing, but I loved the thought processes. I loved figuring things out. I dedicated myself to preparing every day, even if I thought, hey, this is complicated. I pushed myself. I was on the Law Review. I was co-lead articles editor on the Law Review. I was lucky enough to finish first in my class. I got a job with a law firm in Seattle, Washington, Lane, Powell, Moss & Miller. No commas, that was their gimmick. They didn't put commas in the name. Lane, Powell, Moss & Miller. I think at the time it was the 4th largest law firm in Seattle. For a big law firm, which was probably about 60 lawyers, they did an uncharacteristically large amount of litigation. So I did what my firm called commercial litigation. A lot of architect malpractice work, a lot of representing contractors on claims against owners for extra compensation, and anything else that looked like it might get me in the courtroom. my antitrust professor, Ben Hurst, who was the chair of the hiring committee at the University of Puget Sound, which, by the way, is now Seattle University. He asked me to come to his office and see him, and I thought, uh-oh, he realizes that I'm leaning over to my friend Jeff Hill in the back row and making jokes while he's talking about the rule of reason. But the reason he called me in was to say, you know, you ought to think someday about going into teaching. And I thought, wow, you know, that's a seed. And so that seed had been planted. And when my wife Susan was pregnant with our first child, Patrick, that really got me thinking. I thought, if I don't try this now, we're going to be living on Queen Anne Hill in Seattle. I'll be a partner in this law firm. I'll be driving a Volvo, because everybody in the 80s wanted to drive a Volvo wagon. So I went to Columbia and worked on and successfully got my LLM in 1986. I got a call from Frank Mare. I got invited to come to Baton Rouge. LSU was sharp, because when they invited a candidate to come, they also invited the significant other, so that you would be in a position, if you got an offer, to have to accept or deny and not be able to spar with the, oh, but my spouse or partner has to see this place. We came, we had a wonderful couple of days, and then we were lucky enough to get a call from Bill Hawkland, who was the chancellor, offering me a position. And I said, that's great, yes. In the mid to late 90s, as much as I loved it, the LSU Law Center was not always the most unified, happiest place. And I was prone at times to complain. And at running around the lakes, I would complain to my friend Cheney Joseph. At one point I heard myself complaining, and I thought to myself, you're moaning and groaning. Could you do a better job? And so I decided on that run that I might put up and shut up, and I might think about becoming a dean. I was encouraged by Lucy Magoo to think about being a dean. Frank Mare thought I was crazy, but he was very, very supportive. Why would anybody want to be a dean? And so that's what got me on the road to thinking about being a dean. I said, do I think I could do a better job? And without getting into details, I think some of us, at least at that period at the Law Center, didn't always feel listened to. And so I said, if I'm ever a dean, what I'm going to try to do is listen to my students, listen to the staff, and listen to and empower the faculty. So that's really how I got into it. Cheney talked to Justice Lemon and Chief Justice Calagaro about me becoming the executive director of the Louisiana Judicial College. So I thought to myself, I'm not ready to be a dean yet, at least not at the place where I was a finalist. So this will be a good initial administrative experience. So I did that for 2.5 years. Frank said, I saw Tennessee's looking for a dean, and I know Jerry Phillips at Tennessee. And so he called up Jerry Phillips and nominated me for the Tennessee deanship. Tennessee was moving faster than LSU at the time, and things worked out wonderfully at Tennessee. So in 1998, I said my goodbye to LSU, and the family moved to Knoxville, Tennessee, where I became dean of the University of Tennessee College of Law. And I got an email from a search firm that said Colby Sawyer College in New London, New Hampshire, is looking for a president. So I called up Lauren Crabtree. I said, what do you know about this place? He said, I don't know much. What I've heard is good. I'm nominating you. And literally the next thing I knew, I was interviewing in New London at this idyllic liberal arts-based college, and I swore to myself going in I was not going to get emotionally involved. I realized on the second day as snow began to fall that I was emotionally involved. I was lucky enough they offered me the job, and me and Jenny moved to New Hampshire. So that's how I became a college president. I called up Cheney and I said, Cheney, next year I'd love to come back. And Cheney said, well, I'm sorry, that job's really just not available anymore. And I said, well, what do you mean? He goes, well, that's not available, but we're looking for a dean. I desperately wanted to come back to Louisiana. I had never left intellectually. I had kept writing about Louisiana tort law. I had kept writing about admiralty. Thanks to Bill Corbett, Cheney Joseph, I had been invited to speak to the Judicial College, to LSU CLE, to the LADC, and to my friends at the Louisiana Association of Justice probably 4 or 5 times a year. So I was always coming back. I interviewed. It was great because I got the job, but it was really bittersweet because our friend Cheney Joseph, who had been co-interim dean with Bill, had passed away in December of 2015. I thought my days of being college president were over. I was in my office in November of 2019, the week of the Alabama game, and Christina Hood, who really runs the law school, came into my office and she said, Mary Werner, the chair of the board of supervisors, is in town and she wants to come meet you. So Mary came to talk to me, and she and I talked for about half an hour. We talked about the Alabama game, we talked about teaching at the law school, we talked about LSU. It was a social visit. And she left, and in December 11th, 10th, I was grading, and Christina Hood came into my office and she said, Mary Werner's going to be in town tomorrow and the next day. She wants to come to see you. And I said, she wants to see me again? I said, well, great. I mean, she's a pleasant, wonderful person. Let's schedule it for tomorrow afternoon. So I was great. I stayed home that morning and I was going to meet her at 2 and I went in. December 11th, it was a Wednesday. I put a tie on. Mary Werner came in. I said, hi, it's good to see you. How was your Thanksgiving? She said, great. I'm not going to beat around the bush. King Alexander, we expect we'll get a job offer from Oregon State on Friday. Do you have any appetite to be interim president of LSU? I said, well, wow. And I said, Mary, let me ask Susan. I got to talk to my wife, Susan. She said, that's fine, but let me know as soon as you talk to her. I talked to Susan. She said, why not? I called Mary. I said, okay, we'll do it. And that Friday, I went down to New Orleans and I gave a talk on torts to the Louisiana Association of Justice. I left the talk. It was at the Hyatt. I sat down in a chair. My phone rang. It was Jim Saborin, the VP for communications for LSU. He said, Oregon State is announcing this minute. In 5 minutes, we're going to release your name as the interim president. I ended up being interim president for 18 months, and it was, I would say, a tumultuous period. It was an adventure, and there were many, many memorable moments. The first would be the national championship on January 13th in the Superdome. Here I had been on the job less than 2 weeks, and I really started January 6th, so it was a week, and we had a national championship. On February 15th, our grandson Gilbert, Sarah, and Jeremiah's child Gilbert was born, our first grandson. Life was rolling along, and then COVID. So we went virtual. We shut down LSU. Everybody went home. Then Ahmaud Arbery was killed. George Floyd was killed. And Black Lives Matter and social justice movements were vibrant all over the country, including at LSU. So we were very, very active in meeting with our students and working with our students to talk about how we could make LSU a more diverse and a more inclusive place. The board was kind enough to take the interim title away and retroactively say that I was the president of LSU, and that's a real honor. I'm going to have the best title that there is in the world, which is professor of law. Throughout my time as an administrator, except for the LSU presidency, I generally taught a course a semester or a course a year, so I kept teaching. But I'm going to be a full-time faculty member again. Susan and I have had 4 kids. Patrick was born in Seattle and came to Baton Rouge when he was 18 months old. He's now a lawyer in San Diego, California. Our oldest daughter, Sarah, is married to Jeremiah Gould and has 1 son, Gilbert, with another son, we don't know the name yet, on the way, so we're excited about that. They live in Concord, New Hampshire, and she's the library director of the New Hampshire Historical Society. Our youngest daughter, Jennifer, is just switched jobs. She's been in not-for-profits and fundraising. She's 29. She's married to Ethan O'Connell. And our third child, and the fourth one I'll talk about, Aisling. It's a Gaelic name. It means dream or vision. Aisling passed away in 2019 from non-small cell lung cancer. She was a second-year medical student at Brown and came out of nowhere. She not a smoker, took care of herself, exercised, and so we went through 10 months of really hell, but when she felt well during that 10 months, we were all over the place. The whole family kind of came together. And she passed away in 2019. We also have 2, I call them surrogate sons, Prithal Karki and Dipes Dawadi. And they are Colby Sawyer College graduates who are from Nepal. And my last year in Nepal, they led a trip of 11 faculty and students to Nepal. And so Aisling and I went to Nepal together with Prithal and Dipes, and we spent 2 weeks. And ever since then, Prithal and Dipes have been part of the family. I think I'm most proud of my family, and I would want my kids to remember me as somebody who they could have a good time with and talk to and be themselves. As a teacher, and I think all teachers are going to say this, I want to be remembered by my students as a good teacher. And as somebody who cared about them and who was dedicated to their success and their well-being. And as an administrator and as a person, I would like it if people would think, you know, he was a pretty good boss, and he listened to us, and even though I didn't always agree with him, he was fair.